This is our third and probably final update on the North Sea collision between the container ship Solong and the tanker Stena Immaculate. And it's providing to be an interesting comparison between two captains. First, on the Stena Immaculate, we have a release from Crowley, who's the U.S. firm that manages the ship. They indicate that as of March 16th, which was this past Sunday, Smith Salvage has been able to board the vessel and has confirmed that the damage was limited to one cargo tank containing Jet A1 fuel and one ballast tank containing seawater. At the time of the collision, the Stena Immaculate was carrying 220,000 barrels of Jet A1 fuel, and it has been confirmed that only 17,515 barrels have been lost due to the impact and the fire. The remaining cargo and bunkers are secure. Now here's the heads-up move on the crew of the Stena Immaculate. From the release, before being forced to abandon ship, the crew had the dedication and presence of mind to ensure fire monitors were active in order to provide boundary cooling water to the adjacent cargo tanks. So this is why when we saw the video earlier in our last update, there appeared to be firefighting equipment operating on board the Stena Immaculate, even though salvors had not yet been able to board the vessel. The crew on board was able to enable that before they abandoned ship, which is super a heads-up move and probably went a long way to keep additional tanks from being breached, and this being a much larger fire that burned on for longer and limiting the amount of product that escaped into the environment. So now we have the master of the Solong, who we now know is Vladimir Motin, age 59, and a Russian national. He was in charge of the ship and apparently on the bridge when it collided with the Stena Immaculate. He faced charges in Hull Magistrate Court on Saturday and is being held in custody. Captain Motin did not enter a plea at that court appearance. The next court appearance is scheduled for the 14th of April. Also revealed in that court hearing was there were no communication attempts from the Solong to warn the Stena Immaculate of the crash. So the captain was likely unaware that it was about to occur. We also know that Filipino national Mark Angelo Perenia, age 38, is the sailor who died in the collision. The fires on the Solong are also reported to be largely contained, with a few spot fires remaining burning, likely in cargo containers. Those are not thought to be a concern, and firefighting tugs remain on standby. So, back to the question of what happened. From our analysis of the AIS tracks, it looks as though the Solong was operating on autopilot. With the master on the bridge, he was likely engaged in other master tasks, paperwork, route planning, etc., and not really paying attention to where the ship was going. Since he made no attempts to communicate with the Stena Immaculate, it seems that he was unaware that there was a collision impending. That raises the question, why did none of the alarms on the bridge sound, warning of a potential collision? Radar and AIS should have had the Stena Immaculate clearly visible, even if the captain wasn't looking out the window. Surrounding this case, there's also been an interesting discussion as to whether or not this was a collision or an Allison. In nautical terms, a collision is between two moving vessels, whereas an Allison is considered to be when a vessel runs into a fixed object, such as a dock or a pier. Where this becomes interesting is that if this is a collision under the rules of the road, the coal regs, both vessels bear some responsibility to avoid that collision, which would include a vessel at anchor. And this is where I think the investigation is going to get interesting, because we have a pretty good idea of what may or may not have happened on the Solong, but we still don't know what happened on the Stena Immaculate. Did they attempt to make any communication with the Solong? Were they aware of the impending collision before it happened? What was going on with the watch there? Even though it would be very difficult for the Stena Immaculate to actually move out of the way, they certainly could have taken steps to warn of the impending collision, such as sounding their horn or attempting to reach the Solong by radio. It's also interesting that the Cowley release that I referenced earlier explicitly calls this an Allison and not a collision. By calling it an Allison, it absolves them of any responsibility. When this case inevitably hits the Admiralty courts and insurance companies duke it out, if this is a collision, then a certain percentage of the fault could potentially lie with the Stena Immaculate, which would mean that the Stena Immaculate's insurance company is on the hook for some of the damages, for any environmental or other losses to cargo owners. If this is an Allison, then 100% of the fault lies with the Solong, and their insurers are responsible for all losses. I think the Allison argument is probably flawed because a ship at anchor is not a fixed object. It is capable of moving, and in fact it will move on its own. And there is supposed to be someone on watch on the vessel who could take steps to attempt to avoid the collision. What remains to be seen is what action they did take. I can't tell you how long it takes for a case to go to trial in the UK. Preliminary court dates are usually early, and then there's a waiting period while the sides get their cases and defense together before it actually hits trial. But I suspect that the trial of the captain will be the first incident, or the first explanation we get as to what happened at this incident. The UK's Maritime Accident Investigation Board will also be producing a report. If they're anything like the Canadian Transportation Safety Board, that's probably a year or two out. And typically, at least in Canada, the findings of the Transportation Safety Board can't be used in legal proceedings, so they may wait to release the report until after the legal proceedings are settled. And then, of course, we have all the civil actions in Admiralty Court, which can take years to settle as the various sides argue their claims. So this is probably the last update video on the initial incident, barring some unforeseen change in the situation, like one of the vessels sinking. We will certainly make it a point of being back when this trial happens, or when that MABE investigation report comes out. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it. It helps the channel immensely, and please subscribe to be notified of future videos. We have an ongoing situation in Newfoundland with a MSC container ship aground, and we're providing periodic updates to that incident as things happen there, though salvage efforts there are mostly delayed due to weather.